Dunbar suggested that we have 5 intimate or best friends who we turn to in times of need, and then we have 15 sympathy friends who we see regularly and who know us well. 5 best friends, 15 regular friends, and 150 acquaintances. Dunbar also noted how we need to bond with our closest 5 at least once a week, our 15 friends once a month, and the 150 at least twice a year. And if we fail to do this, through lack of time or physical distance perhaps, then those friends will drop down.
Venters, I saw the coolest video today and I wanted to talk with you guys about it. British anthropologist Robin Dunbar, around the turn of the century, did an in-depth study on over 200 primate families, orangutans, bonobos, chimpanzees, etc., etc. And he found some interesting things when he looked at the brain size of the various primates. Basically, the bigger the brain size, the more friends and people in your network you're capable of having. When he looked at an additional member of those families, let's call them human beings, because I don't like to put us in the great apes category, right? But apparently there's some interesting things about us. Our magical Dunbar number is 150. What that means is that basically most of us have about 5 really close, we'll call them best friends, or at least we used to. I think the modern world might be messing with the Dunbar number, but let's play it out. In addition to those 5 really close friends, most of us have around 15 friends. They're not super close, they're not super duper important, but they're still important enough where we like to reach out to them once or twice a month just to say hi because they're our friends. Beyond that, we're capable as humans of having roughly 150 associates. Think of the extended family members when you go to Christmas and Thanksgiving, right? You kind of know of them. You know that you're distantly related to some of them, right? Those are your family. We all have about 150 associates / loose friends in our network. Here's what's really fascinating. Beyond that 150, we start to need things like name tags, managers, people that can keep track of things. And what we ultimately lose is connection. This is why sometimes you can look at things that are happening in another state or another city over, and we care about them, but we don't really care about them that much. And I find that fascinating. It's at this 150 point where if you go beyond that, you start to look at your 150 as us, and you start to look at other groups as thems. That's why when I see the crazy stuff that happens in Chicago or LA or New York City, I look at it and I say, those people are crazy. It's because I'm not identifying them as my initial 150 membered community. Now, the reason I mention this is because if you and I can start to look at the world from these glasses, these Dunbar numbers, all of a sudden certain things that used to never make sense start to make a lot more sense. When we were younger, the reason we thought the world was a lot kinder and sweeter probably is because it was. But let's say hypothetically, the reason it was is because back then we did not have the internet. You kind of focused on your immediate community, and most of the people in that community were actually kind because they saw you as a member of the said community. Now we live more on a worldly stage. That's why people have no problem telling somebody on the other side of the world to go stuff it when we don't want to hear about their political ideologies. Isn't that kind of crazy? Yet super interesting. There's a breakdown of society at a certain point. It's always going to be us versus them, because according to the Dunbar number, we might just genetically be built to look at the world as an us versus them sort of society way. I think that's really interesting. Your 5 best friends, according to Dunbar, you need to be in contact with them at least once a week. If you go too far beyond that, pretty soon they start to see you not as a best friend, but just as a regular friend or an associate, right? Conversely, your regular friends, you still want to keep them in the loop with what you're doing at least once or twice a month. Again, nothing major. Maybe you go out with a coworker a couple times a month out to lunch. They're your friend. The 150 associates and loose family members that we all have, you might be okay seeing them once or twice a year. If you go too far beyond that, pretty soon people literally no longer see you as their friend. I think this is why when we go to Facebook, we naturally get jealous of people that have 1,000,001 friends, but deep down we all know nobody really has that many friends.
I have a friend who always checks in, wondering how I've been.
Sometimes Facebook seems like a popularity contest in and of itself. I used to always brag to people that out of my 200 or some odd friends on Facebook, I actually know them. But even after knowing them, I assure you, I am not friends with all of them, if you know what I mean. In the video I was watching, they even brought up some really good examples that are kind of stunning. Let's say you and I are walking by the river, and we see somebody in there drowning. And we decide, hey, I'm gonna jump in there and save them. So we do. Now, in so doing, we ruin our $60 pair of jeans and our $40 shirt. We basically donated $100 to save this one person. Well, it sounds admirable. A lot of us would do that for a person, especially if it's a little child, right? But take that same person, put them on the other side of the world, and you can even multiply them by 100. Now you have 100 people depending on you, and all you have to do is take out your wallet and donate that same $100. Well, now it doesn't seem so easy. It doesn't seem so cut and dry. You couldn't help but jump in and save the person. Who cares about the $100 worth of clothing you were about to ruin, right? It was for the cause of saving this human that's right there in your immediate community. However, once again, it's really difficult to want to take out your checkbook and send a $100 check to some strange group on the other side of the world. Now it's starting to get a little interesting, because that's very true. Most of us would give up $100 worth of anything to save someone's life, but not if it means actually writing a check for someone that we'll never see. Very super interesting. I'll tell you what else is interesting, Venters. This Dunbar number effect thing, it's just one topic of hundreds that are interesting. So I had an idea. I'm thinking about talking about little different snafus like this that might actually determine how we as members of society act with one another. There's a lot of these little Dunbar's numbers and different principles out there that are new, some of which I've heard about, many of which none of us have. I think I'm going to start looking up one or two a week and sharing it with the Venters, because I love you guys. Here's a couple of comments from that video. Shines says, this is why a company/division in the military has about 150 people in it. If you keep the military division to 150 people, those people are your brothers and sisters. You'll lay down your life for them. That's why a lot of times veterans will be, in active duty, they get injured. You would think they would want to go home and be with their families, but a lot of times they want to recoup and get better so they can do what? So they can join their brothers and sisters back on that battlefield. But if those divisions weren't 150, let's say they were 1.5 million people, pretty soon you wouldn't have a connection with anybody. Who cares about 1.5 million people? It's a lot easier to care about somebody that you see as your brother or sister. At least that's how I'm looking at it. Leo 99929 says, I totally agree that most modern societal issues we face are due to the neo-tribal us versus them mentality. This is why I think I roll my eyes that we as people allow all these things to happen. But the reality is, if you and I both live in neighborhoods where this doesn't happen, maybe it's just not that easy for us to get that emotionally stoked up about something. It's kind of interesting if you think about it. In other words, we get upset at people because things don't bother them until it does bother them. But if that's how the simulation was set up, maybe I, Jesse Jameson, head venter, maybe I need to chill out. I think we are in a simulation. That's what I think things like the Dunbar number prove. I don't think it proves that the bigger brain we have, the more people we can let into our immediate family. Because if that were the case, I think elephant herds would probably be in the millions, right? They've got a really big brain. I think what it really shows is just that a lot of times we think we want 1,000,001 options, when in reality, maybe we really don't. Do you guys remember in the 80s when all of us had about 15 channels and we would all talk about the same programs? You remember we would go to school on Monday and we would be talking about The Cosby Show or Family Ties? I would argue that we had more to watch together then than we do now, now that we have 1,001 options. If you include YouTube and TikTok, we actually have billions of viewing options. Yet none of us really talk about those things to one another. Very, very amazing. I love this stuff. Stuff like that makes you think. At first you just think it's an inkling you have. What separates us from gorillas and chimpanzees and stuff. And then you start to realize, well, maybe we can use this knowledge elsewhere. Maybe this is why people treat each other so poorly, even though they might live in the same city or state. Now, Jesse, that's not really true. What do you mean? Well, if you go beyond the community of 150, we still do have little bonds, and this is true. For example, in Phoenix, you might have a bond with somebody because you're Arizona Cardinal fans, Arizona Diamondback fans. You might be Baptist. You might be non-denominational. You might be Muslim. There's all these little ties that go beyond that 150 number. However, they're considered looser ties. You might not know me, you might not have ever seen me, but if you and I both have a cross on our neck, we probably both know that we're both Christian. Either that or we both have a weird sense of fashion, because I'm sure there's one or two people out there that wear a cross simply because they think it looks fashionable, right? But think about that. In America, I might not know somebody in New York, but if we're both Catholic or we're both Christian, we have that little thing that binds us together. Or you could say we were both American. Before this, I had never heard of the Dunbar number. If you guys had heard of it, but you forgot about it, maybe let us know down in the comments. If this is the first time you've heard of it and you find it kind of interesting, the reason I find it interesting is maybe it kind of explains a lot. Why do people care so much about themselves and so little about others? Well, maybe it's because that's how genetically we've always been. You take care of the things that are closest to you. Here's what doesn't make sense to me. You ever see some people and they get really fired up over something that doesn't really affect them? For example, you see a 60 or 70-year-old woman and she's really, really fired up about immigration, even though maybe her whole family 10 generations back lives here in the States, right? Or maybe she's really fired up about reproductive rights, even though she's obviously, well beyond the age where she has to worry about it. Sometimes I wonder, are those like things that we shouldn't be so adamant about? Why are we so adamant about that if it doesn't affect us within our small little community? Another thing, let's say somebody gets in a fender bender and somebody's hurt and the car's in the middle of the road. You see 100 people in a circle and 25 people are right next to the person giving them first aid. Maybe that's what enables us to say, someone else is taking care of it, and you just walk on by. You don't really care. It's not like you're going to be sick and not want to eat the rest of the night, right? You're going to go right to Denny's or wherever you're headed, and you're going to stuff your mouth anyway. God forbid somebody's dying, and God forbid you miss out on your Denny's meal, even though we could probably all afford to miss out on a Denny's meal. So that's my new game plan, Ventures. I think I'm going to take one of these different principles and stuff. Hopefully we'll find some that sound vaguely familiar, and maybe we'll find some that sound completely new to us. But here's the cool thing. You might have heard of a couple of these principles or what have you. And if you want me to talk about one on a show, put it in the comment section. But please, whatever you do, don't start listing everything and give me 80 things in the comment section. Let's do 1 or 2 at a time. I asked ChatGPT to give me a list of them, and it popped out a list of about 15 or 20, and I thought, oh my goodness, there is a hell of a start. So even if you Venters ignore me, we're still going to have something to talk about for tomorrow. Absolutely love this time of year. I'm telling you, if you're waiting till some magical day where the weather gets better to put your shoes on and walk, you're really missing out. You got to remember, none of us are guaranteed tomorrow. What if starting today delays that heart attack you were about to have next week? I know that sounds macabre and really morbid, but I'm telling you, there is no better day to start your walking routine than this one. Put your shoes on, hit the subscribe button. Let us know in the comments if you're actually starting to walk. And if you are starting to walk, congratulations. Let's keep it going. Have a great night. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.